Welcome, everyone. This is Moal Sumidai, the chief editor at the Pharma Vanguard, and I'm here with Michelle Bridenbaker. And Michelle is the corporate medical information lead at Recordati, and you also are the vice president of medical information leaders in Europe.
Indeed.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, we're going to be talking a bit about medical affairs today. And so medical information is often described as sort of like the front line of trust, right? When it comes to scientific exchange between MSLs and physicians, between pharma companies and the medical community. So in your role as VP of the Medical Information Leaders, or what we're going to call MILE, how has the role of medical information evolved in this sense? And what would you say are some of the key ways in which these trends and information is being shared today?
You know, it's a really important actually discussion, because one of the main tenets and the reasons we started MILE was because we realized we kept having kind of the same issues over and over again. And we realized that the professionalization of medical information, the visual, like actual visibility in organizations, and being able to even articulate the value that MedInfo offered was something that we struggled with. And so we started out at the time around 10 companies that came together as a band of, really passionate MedInfo professionals and leaders. And we thought of this future vision where we had an organization that allowed us to exchange ideas, to bring down some of the barriers within the legislation, because we find that it's a gray area, right? There's a lot that we don't know about, like specifically how we can actually approach MedInfo. So we apply often commercial standards. And what we realized is that that was preventing us from being where we needed to be. And as you said, it's the trusted face of the company for MedInfo. And so what we have done over the years is really focus on upskilling our sort of base of members. And now it's 40 companies that are actually in this organization. And what we really focus on is the really professional skills that they have to actually really pull science together in a very palatable way, making it accessible, lowering the barriers to making it accessible to healthcare professionals, and also encouraging the use of things like technology. So we even early on democratized sort of a platform that helped us to allow MedInfo letters, for example, to be accessible, but in a pan-pharmaceutical space, to again reduce the barrier to clinicians and not make them have to know 40 different companies' websites, but to say, here's a place you can go, you can find kind of how to access us. So that accessibility piece was really critical as well. And so that drive to move us forward to be in the multi-channel space, which was something I think that's really important now that MedInfo does very well. And also being much more creative and adopters of technology, because it helps us to create really interesting content. So things with visualizations and infographics, but also we use AI now, of course, from a technology perspective, to help us create content that's really robust, but very crisp, and in that kind of a really digestible format. And so to sum it up, it's, firstly, we had to make sure that we were the top of our game. We were, the very experts within our realm of MedInfo. We made sure we became very accessible in a go-to point with healthcare professionals. And also that we are often ahead of the curve when it's coming to adopting technology and especially AI.
So at your time in Recordati, could you perhaps tell me an experience where the handling of this complex information, complex data and requests has actually reshaped and influenced a physician's or a patient's perspective about Recordati?
Yeah, and actually I have a really good example where we decided to go down the route of using AI, and I want to highlight, because I think it's a good example of where the value of having AI as your companion, as a human in the MedInfo team, are important. What we really wanted to do is bring us to be more human to the clinician and to be there quicker. And with our products, we actually have rare disease portfolio. So we kind of know our community more intimately, I think, than most other therapeutic areas. And we had a very good example, a couple examples where the clinicians came to us with a very complex patient situation. And the indication for this product is a little bit fuzzy in some areas for the clinicians, and having that clarity and being able to confidently understand what do we know about our own molecule and our own disease that we're actually working within, but also what's out there in the published literature and bringing that together. And where AI comes in is that it was a substantial amount of research we actually had to do for this very complex particular case that came in, because it involved a child who was in, unfortunately, palliative care. And so you could see the urgency and the importance of really getting that information to the doctor quickly, because he really wanted to treat and be able to support this patient, very, very rapidly. And what used to take us, to pull all that kind of information together could be 1 day, 1.5 days. It can take time. With AI, we were able to really sit down, two of us as a team, me being kind of the approver, my team member being the scientific expert, us working together using AI to really slash the time it took us to do that comprehensive literature search, but also searching our own repositories, because this takes a lot of time. And so bringing all of that information together, constructing a really robust answer for the doctor to make his own decision, because that's always the most important thing we have to do, is we give them the knowledge that is out there and they make the clinical decision right for their patient. And in this case, the doctor received that information within 3 hours compared to a day, which it used to be before. We were able to, get that to them immediately, response back from them, very grateful for how quickly we turned it around. And then they immediately started therapy that day based on what the doctor felt was the right information, and really said to us the next day the patient was actually responding and they were doing well. And I think for us, it gets easy to just go, it's a case or it's an inquiry, but there's a human being at the end. And I think this, to me, was we seeing more and more of this, especially at rare disease, because it is such special patients and such complex patients. And so for us, I think that really keen focus on the patient, but also that, courage to say we need to use AI in the right way to do the right things, which is to make very digestible and very rapid turnaround of content for them to make really good decisions.
And how do you verify the information that's given to you by AI?
So the way it's about how you actually use AI that really makes the difference. And that was the biggest learning curve that we've had, is that a lot of people just use it in a generative way like you use on ChatGPT. So you ask a question, it comes out, spits out an answer. What we did was, when we decided to implement AI, and it's, in my opinion, one of the most robust ways to prevent things like hallucinations and just slop, as we say, is putting a clear framework about what are we going to use this for, mapping out closely the micro steps of when is the human in place, when is the AI being used, and then the human comes back in, and it's about saying, what is AI actually good at? It's good at doing things like literature searching and just pulling out the first pass of the information. But the actual evaluation itself is where the human comes in, and the human has to have control. So we broke it down into, like I said, these micro steps of what are the really critical sorts of activities that the human needs to be involved in. So it's really, they're driving this tool, this really powerful tool, to pull the information out of the literature, which is, the stats now are like every 72 days, information's doubling. So to do this as a human is becoming untenable. So AI is really powerful for that. But then also we had disparate sort of systems in place between where our product labels are, where our old content was, where some of our clinical study reports were. And so what we found is that being able also to use AI to tie together these internal resources was really critical for us. So that was kind of a long answer to the reason that we don't feel like we have to per se check it, is because we're driving this AI machine. But at the end, we still have the person who's the author that is driving this whole content that they're creating, but also we still have our robust review processes And one of the key things is with this technology, we make sure everything's fully traceable. So if something comes from a publication, I, as the reviewer, can check that that information's there. So it's really a lot of building in that robustness, that compliance piece. If you get the governance and you get the setup and the framework correct, you know what good looks like, and you're able to effectively be able to execute to that excellence that you're expecting, and really using AI in the right way, which is to improve and to augment your team, not to replace the human, which is the most important thing in that process.
It's all about governance, really.
Yes.
Ensuring that there's sufficient human review throughout the process and how you design that process,
Yes.
essentially.
Yeah.
So, and what's good about that is you can also, if let's say there's an audit, for example, you can go back and trace it back
Yeah.
and say, hey, this is our governance model. Here's exactly what happened.
Yes, that's 1000% correct, because when I've had two different situations where I use sentiment analysis, for example, for quality monitoring in a call center, I had to walk through a regulator that I understood how this worked. When, again, the human was in place, when was the AI in place, how did we validate this, what was that governance piece, and now I've had to do the same thing with generative AI. And so the regulators are now, they have people that are experts in technology, in AI. They're also getting a lot smarter, which is good. They need to keep us on our toes. That's the right checks and balances. But that black box that we see with, just generic sort of LLMs, that's really problematic. You really cannot afford that. You really need to understand actually what that platform does, what does good look like in the process, and being really confident with your governance and your process that you're able to feel in control of that really powerful tool.
And so when we're talking about customer centricity, a lot of people talk about that. And clearly it's very tough to operationalize. And we did talk about governance. Are there any additional practical steps that you would recommend to other pharmaceutical companies to, embed a customer first thinking into medical information teams, like especially in rare diseases?
Yeah, I think the key is, and maybe it's also because it's how I've been working and I've found my teams have been successful, and the collaborations in Mile, like that best practice sharing we've been doing as a group, is we realize we have to, if we're on top of the way that people communicate. So we need to now have a greater understanding of communication. It used to just be, you have to be good at literature searching and compiling information. What customer centricity looks like now is saying, where is my HCP or patient actually getting information? What is their preferred method? Do they like a nice short form video? Do they want an infographic? Or are they an oncologist who's super happy to read a 15-page response letter, right? Like there's different, you really have to understand what their preferences are. And I've seen this evolving over the years. I think for a long time, this was something that was taken for granted and not necessarily mapped out. We would map out where their office is, where they fit in our, planning, but we didn't go, what actually is your preferred channel to get information from us? What do you actually like for content, right? These were things that we weren't necessarily asking when we first went into the multi-channel space. And I think that's what we do now. We do, a lot of work with getting feedback from customers and saying, hey, how did this information, did you receive this well? Was this visualization helpful? So it's about keeping track of not just being good at summarizing information, but being able to summarize it in a very concise and very palatable way, whether it's a very specialized HCP, maybe a more generalist versus a patient or caregiver, but also, again, being brave enough to say, yeah, MedInfo letters were a nice thing to do, but that's not reality anymore. We need to think much, much bigger. And what bigger looks like is, do we look at maybe being brave enough to go into social media? I'm very controversial in thinking this, but I'm like, it's something we have to think about because it's realistically where people are. We have to really do a good job and have our websites so that they can be found, that they're relevant, that they have the information that can fit many different learning styles. So I think for MedInfo now, it's not just about being good at creating letters. It's about being good at understanding what the customer actually needs. Because in MedInfo, we make, at least in my organizations, we make data-driven decisions. We don't just go, well, I'm good at doing this, so I'm going to keep doing this. It's no, let's see what the data says. Are people downloading this letter if we put it on a website? Are they, replying to our, inquiry and saying, thank you so much, that infographic was extremely helpful, which we've had that quite often from pharmacies. So it's taking that feedback and let that drive what we actually do versus even what we know is comfortable and what has always been done. And I think that's what's important about Mile, because we're trying to help pave that road as well, to give people safety, to say this is the new world we work in, and we need to figure it out, and we need to be good at it.
So many KOLs want information exchange, a
Yeah.
two-way bridge,
Yeah.
right? How could medical information serve as a two-way bridge, both receiving and returning value in scientific exchange?
I think it goes back to, again, really when MedInfo for many, many years has had just a plethora of information, and a lot of companies never leveraged it. I would say even as like kind of just 5 years ago, we saw that, people just were like, MedInfo is a necessary evil, let it tick along as long as nothing's going badly, I'm good. But then someone like me and some organizations and some of us in the leadership positions in MedInfo were like, we're sitting on, in some cases, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of customer interactions and insights. And so for us, once you started digging into it, and then you started even putting it together with maybe some of the things that are being published, maybe some of the things we're hearing from ad boards, maybe the things that MSLs are hearing, and you start to put that picture together, I really have found that MedInfo is extremely effective now and part of that puzzle, right? We're not the whole part of that interaction with a KOL, but we're part of the puzzle. And I think when you said about having a two-way discussion, it's about, number one, getting it right, which means all of us in medical affairs, including MedInfo, have a part in that communication and engagement with the KOL, but also that, not being afraid to ask the KOL, was that what you needed? Do you need anything else? I mean, we actively ask this, if this is not what you need or you need something further. So that openness to say, bring us back information. But also we are often able to see really complex situations setting up in MedInfo as well at the clinical side, at the patient side. And what we also can do is work with our MSL team. And I think that also is a new evolution, is that really close working with the MSL and MedInfo to say, we know what we do well, we know what the MSL does, and activating them and saying, hey, this is a really complex question that this KOL or this key prescribing center is seeing. Can we activate, and they need some support maybe from another center, you guys, know what to do, you do your thing. So I think MedInfo now, it's about, like I said, making data-driven decisions, being open to that discussion, both back and forth with clinicians. And last but certainly not least is that really great seamless working with the MSL now is something that it's a very powerful model that is really appreciated by clinicians.
And so digital tools have really transformed how HCPs access information.
Indeed.
So what lessons would you say have you learned about tailoring digital channels without losing that personal trust that defines those rare disease communities?
It's interesting because there's just a recent survey that was done. It's done every 2 years by IQVIA, and it's a really interesting survey about what HCPs are actually looking for content, what channels they go to, and then what we do. And it's interesting because what I took away from this year's report is a couple of things. One is the information that's out there, we say the attention economy, so to speak, of our clinicians is very complicated now. It used to be we would worry about if they could find us, number one, but also could they, who is our competitor, and are we doing a better job than them with connecting with the community, right? But it's no longer that case anymore. And what we've realized is Google is still, really outpacing everybody for, HCPs for their searching. But social media channels now, like LinkedIn and Facebook, for example, have great science communicators now that are out there and providing value in the human channels that a HCP is actually in at the moment, right? And so that's a new thing that we're not used to. But now you add the layer of AI, which is now further complicated the environment that we're in, because over 50% now are using large language models really to make treatment decisions or help them with that research to get it more rapidly. The good news is they know the limitations, thank goodness. And same with social media, there's limitations because there's a lot of mis and disinformation as well. So I think, for us, it's what I've realized is that we need to be more conscientious of, what's the reality. Also the reality that our HCPs are really time starved. They do a lot of their research and the, sort of education in what we call pajama time. So that's, anything after the work hours when they're supposed to be spending it with family and, doing exercise, and they're not doing these things. And so it's like for us, if we really want to be valuable, we have to be conscientious in the multi-channel space that we have really good, impactful, and really impactful is the word, content, that it's available when they need it, and that's 24/7, it's seeming nowadays. And also, quite frankly, social media has upped the game, and it said, hey, if all these content creators can create stuff that really hits, why are we doing the same thing and expecting a different result? So I think from my perspective, if you're going to get multi-channel right now, you have to understand that this is the real space that we work in, and that the way we did it, the status quo, is no longer, in my opinion, an acceptable way, I think, to tackle this topic.
And looking ahead, what do you see as the biggest opportunity for medical information to elevate its role from reactive responder, for example, to proactive shaper of medical and commercial strategy?
Yeah, I think in the last, like I said, 5 years, our position, our value has been increasing. And I think it's because we've been harnessing our data. And also the fact that we are the closest in reality to the actual patient or to the actual healthcare professional. And I think that in the past, we were, like you said, just on the sidelines, and like sometimes they'd check in, and we would sometimes be a part of the strategic imperative building. Whereas now we're in a pull position with the medical teams and saying, okay, let's work together. When we create a holistic, because I know omnichannel was a buzzword for a long time, but what that meant was not just commercial went and did a super cool campaign or medical went and did a nice campaign. It was, now we've realized, again, that whole, what is the customer's like ecosystem look like? What are their informational needs? What's their educational needs? What's the unmet medical need? And coordinating that now amongst all the players in med affairs. So this is, med info, med communications, MSLs, this is real world evidence, clinical trials teams that are working with us as well, and saying, okay, all of us have a piece of this customer journey. Some of it overlaps, so how do we work together? But also, how do we make sure that they have what they need from us, not just what we know how to do, or sometimes like maybe what a commercial team might say, well, this is what you want you to do. It's now medical's got a place, commercial's got a place. We all have a complementary space within the customer's journey, but within medical as well, we are more highly coordinated. And I think the most successful med affairs teams I've ever worked in, this is the case. And I think that's where MedInfo can't be passive anymore and just go, yeah, we're the necessary evil. We kind of just put your head down, do your job. We are really a critical part and the customer facing part. And we can do a lot to the reputation positively, negatively, if we are not doing our job well. So like I said, it's really being much more proactive and saying we must be at the table with the rest of medical affairs. And it's medical affairs as a whole being open to saying we all have a part in this, grander plan of how we're going to educate, communicate, and support our clinicians in their treating decisions. And at the end of the day, I think that's really critical. It's really strong leadership within medical information, but also picking the right teams that are going to support that vision with you as a leader.
Mm-hmm. It's good information, relevant information, the right channels, and the right influence for both physician and the patients. Thank you so much, Michelle. Michelle Bridenbaker, thank you so much for sitting down with us.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.